I was born with a case of really bad club feet. They were clubbed and then clubbed again, so that I would never have been able to walk if something hadn't been done. Nothing was done to my feet until I was 1 year old, and by then the cartilage had turned to bone and caused a real problem trying to correct anything. So at 1 year old, I was taken to Shriners Hospital for crippled children, and that became my home away from home for the next 5 years. I had surgery after surgery, just dozens of surgeries during that time. And I don't remember any of it. I shut it out of my mind, but I know that it wasn't a happy time because my picture was on several of the brochures, and I was always the one hugging the teddy bear or the stuffed animal who looked like I was about to cry.
Alright, well, I was born and raised in this beautiful church, and when I was in 3rd grade on September 9th, 2002, I accepted Jesus into my heart, and my sister was the main person in my life who led me to do that, and we were actually in this room when it all happened, so it's kind of crazy.
I went a full year to kindergarten there at Shriners Hospital, and then I was released just before time to start 1st grade. And I was released with a pair of ugly shoes. They were dark brown shoes that came up to the top of my ankles, and the toes pointed out instead of in. I hated the shoes, and I hated the way I looked in the shoes. I was very self-conscious. I felt like when anybody looked at me, first they noticed that I could hardly walk, and second they noticed the ugly shoes.
Years later, like when I was in middle school and stuff, I was struggling a lot with emotional things and, you know, things that were going on in my family and stuff, and that caused me to be kind of rebellious at times, and then leading into high school, kind of the same thing. And
when I was 13, our pastor, Reverend Proctor, took the teens to hear a speaker at another church, and my brother Joe and I went to hear the speaker. He started out by saying, God loves you just the way you are. And I thought, there's no way God loves me. I don't love me, and I didn't think anybody else loved me, and I didn't see how God could love me. And then he said, and God created you just the way he wanted you to be. And I knew that couldn't possibly be right. I thought, why would God create somebody that looked like me? But he got my attention, and I listened to everything he had to say. At some point in that message, I began to believe what he was saying. He said God loved us so much that he was willing to let his son die a horrible death on the cross for us. And I began to realize that what I had been through was nothing compared to what Christ went through. At the end of that message, I went forward and knelt at the altar, and Christ became a part of my life. At that point, all the self-pity and self-hatred just melted away. My life was changed. A year later, I was back at Shriners Hospital for crippled children, this time for a real intricate bone surgery. They took 3 bones in each foot and switched them around to try to make the feet straighter. And it was a very painful surgery with a long recovery, a lot of rehab. But my parents were contacted to come and bring me home, and we met with a group of doctors there at Shriners. It was always that way. It was always a large group that I met with. And one of the doctors said to my parents, you can take her to the nearest shoe store and buy her any pair of shoes she wants. Well, I had always thought and had been told that I would have to wear my ugly shoes for the rest of my life. These dark brown shoes with the toes pointing out. And it was a shock to me and to my parents. We had no idea that this surgery could do that for me.
And my sophomore year of high school, I went on my first mission trip to Hamlin, West Virginia, and that was a really big moment for me. I feel like that was more of the time I really accepted Jesus and understood what it meant to be a Christian and to follow Him, and not just say you're a Christian, but actually following Him and, you know, doing His will and stuff. And so that was a really big moment for me, but even after that, I was still struggling a lot.
We went to a shoe store there in Chicago, and I looked around and I found a pair of bright red shoes. And I said, those are the shoes I want. Well, they let me get them, and I went home in those bright red shoes. I'm sure people thought I was really goofy, but it was nice to not have to wear brown shoes. We went home, and the first thing I did was walk across the street to this field where my brothers played ball. And I sat down in the grass, and I took off my red shoes and my socks, and I walked across the field for the first time with straight feet. And at the end of the field, I kneeled down and I thanked God for the miracle that He had done through the doctors at Shriners.
Things like that, but from that point, I think I've just learned very slowly, you know, what it means to be loved for, you know, just being you. You know, God loves you because He loves you. You know, that was a big thing I learned this past summer when I went to Africa on a mission trip. They really emphasized the fact, you know, that like God loves you because He loves you, you know, like He loves you the same now as He will forever, you know.
A generation later, our daughter Christy was born with the same feet. We had been told that couldn't happen, that wasn't going to happen, and so we didn't worry about it. We knew that the treatments needed to start immediately, so she was 11 days old and she had her first surgery, and every 2 weeks after that she had surgery on her feet. Christy went on to win the regional, sectional, singles tennis title when she was a senior. Went on to IVCC and played in the Nationals for 2 years. And Christy loves the Lord, as do I. And we don't take our lives for granted. And we don't take the ability to walk for granted. But we know this. I know that not everybody has a miracle like that performed in their life. That isn't something we can expect. But there's a much greater miracle, and that is the miracle of God allowing His Son to die on the cross.
I struggled a lot with feeling like I was worth something, and that, you know, my opinion mattered, and that I mattered in this world, and that I made a difference. And, you know, if I follow God's will and I do everything in His name, like I can make a difference because He is using me, and I can be His hands and feet in this world. So that's my story.
What I have spent my life realizing that is that it doesn't really matter what I look like. And it really doesn't matter what I've been through with my life, or what I did with my life, how talented or smart. Those aren't really the things that matter. What matters is what God did for me by sending His Son to die on the cross. Because through that I can have a relationship day by day with Him. And I can know that when I die, I'll spend eternity with Him. And that really is a miracle.